Good morning, students. Here we are out behind the barn this lovely morning, and I want to talk about some of the things that you'll need in order to make compost tea. Now, a couple of disclaimers. Compost tea can have a lot of purported health benefits for plants. It can be applied foliarly, so sprayed on the leaves, or it can be applied directly to the roots of the plant. What we're doing when we are making compost tea is in effect trying to extend the impact of our compost production. So a lot of times we can't make enough compost to help our farm really thrive just because it's physically hard to make that amount of compost. But one way to extend the benefits of compost is to turn that compost into this bacterially rich community of organisms. Yeah? Are you following along? So, to that end, we really like to make compost tea on our farm. We tend to make it in batches of 50 gallons at a time, and we don't aerate it with a pump. We usually just stir it. And so I'm going to talk to you about a stirring method, but I will say that one thing that makes the best compost tea is to have a little fish pump aerator that you just put the pump in and let it bubble away over the night, and then in the morning you can use it. So the process of making compost tea can be done with a few simple elements. You need a bucket of water, you need a stick. Can you see those in this camera? Can you make a camera see those? And then the other thing you also need is a cloth. Can you see the cloth in the camera? I've got some camera help today, so thank you, camera person. You're doing great. All right, and then it's useful to have some string. Okay, so now I'm gonna kneel down here so maybe the camera can see me kneel. Yeah? Okay. So I don't know if you recall back from our lecture on worm compost, but I've got my worm bin still here, which has been just happy as all get out, and I just wanted to show you. Can you zoom in here on these worms? Look at all these happy worms that have been living in the worm compost since we had lecture. When was that, like 2 weeks ago? They're so happy, and they've really just been kind of colonizing up onto the burlap sack there. Really nice to see such happy worms. I'm going to shake those guys off. But worm compost is the best compost to use to make compost tea, because what you're trying... Oh my gosh, and also... Oh, so cool. These worms have been so happy, they really reproduced a ton. And you can see here in my hand, one... Can you zoom in on that? Is it in focus? 1, 2, 3 little worm cocoons, and I'm getting the signal to come a bit closer to the camera. Now if you press that button halfway down, you can sometimes make it get in a little bit better focus. Yeah? So there they are, 1, 2, 3 little worm eggs, and this bin is full of worm eggs. Okay, so now we're going to zoom. Can you zoom us back out there? Alright, well, that is exciting. But what I'm going to do is kind of paw through here and get... Gosh, there's so many eggs. I can't believe how happy these worms are. Oh my gosh. This worm bin is happier than my normal worm bin. But so now I'm just gonna try to pick out the worms, because I don't want to have the worms in the things. Okay, so now I've got a handful of worm compost, and probably I would want, for a 5-gallon bucket, I'd want probably 2 cups worth of worm compost. So I'm gonna need a little bit more here, and after you get the worm compost that you want, just like a little hobo sack. I don't know if you all are familiar with sort of the hobo vision of the hobo carrying the stick over the shoulder. That's kind of what we're going to do to make our compost tea. So now we've got our sack, and we have some string here. So we'll just kind of wrap the string around the cloth to make a little sack. And a good sack is a sack that the water can pass in and out, so like you want a cotton material. And then you take your 5-gallon bucket and you fill it full with regular tap water. And if you're living in a place where you have city water, a good precaution is to set that bucket out overnight before you start making the worm bin compost. So if you're in the city, which I'm not in a city, so my water is coming out of the ground, there's no chlorine in it, but chlorine is the opposite of what you're trying to cultivate in your worm compost, or your CompostTEA. You're trying to cultivate a rich bacterial community, so you don't want to have chlorine in that water. So I would say let the water sit overnight and the chlorine will volatilize, so it will go away, and you'll be left with really nice water for making CompostTEA. So once you've got your bucket, you set your cloth bag so it's suspended. Hold on. There we go. So it's suspended in the bucket, not touching the ground, but suspended in the water. The stick helps hold the cloth up out of the bottom of the bucket. And then you let it sit. And ideally, you want to just let it sit for about 24 hours. You don't want to let it sit for too long. And then after about 24 hours of time, you can take your cloth out of the bucket, take the stick out of the bucket, and now you have 4 or 5 gallons of liquid CompostTEA that you can then apply on your field. And just a note about time, you kind of want to do this in about a 24-hour period because you don't want to let the tea sit too long. Periodically, while the tea is sitting during the day, you might come back and just stir it a little bit. A little bit of air helps the process go really well. And then put the tea out on the plants either foliarly or applying it to the roots, and you'll have really healthy, happy plants. And that's the method of making aerobic CompostTEA. There's another method, which is anaerobic CompostTEA, which we could talk about if you have questions after class. Thank you so much for listening.